Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of Trump Trolls Trump. You know, the show where someone with a certain last name relentlessly, mercilessly, and deservedly mocks another person who just so happens to use the same last name. Stop it. Anyway, I'm not going to tell you who is who. I trust you to decide. It has now officially been 180 days. That's mind-blowing to me. Since the Trump regime came back into power, that is 25 straight weeks of, and let's call it what it is, winning. For those of you keeping count at home, a story came out this week along those lines, really, because Donald posted about one of his favorite things on the planet, CocaCola. Although not his particular type. So I found this sort of mystifying, but he's a deep guy. I'm sure there is some profound reason for him to discuss this very vital issue. We're not sure if the soft drink brand is on board with Donald's idea, because essentially what he's calling for is for the most recognizable, iconic brand on the planet to change its secret formula. But hey, why not? Take a look at this report from CNBC.
President Trump says Coca-Cola will be updating its American ingredients list. That news coming in a Truth Social post from the president, who is a noted fan of Diet Coke. He said, "I've been speaking to Coca-Cola about using real cane sugar in Coke in the United States, and they have agreed to do so." He added, "It's just better." U.S. Coca-Cola is made with high fructose corn syrup, at least as best as we know. It is a secret recipe. Archer Daniels Midland is one of the biggest producers of that ingredient. The shares for Archer Daniels are down by about 5.7%, much lower in the pre-market. When asked later yesterday about the president's claim, Coke didn't explicitly say that it would make that switch to cane sugar. In a statement, the company said, "We appreciate President Trump's enthusiasm for our iconic Coca-Cola brand. More details on new innovative offerings within our Coca-Cola product range will be shared soon."
Yes, I'm sure they will be. I'm sure Coke has every intention of changing its ingredients, because that's worked out so brilliantly in the past. I mean, actually, it did work out once when they took cocaine out of it. That was definitely a good move. But new Coke, not so much. Oh, I have an idea. Let's change it from high fructose corn syrup, which quite frankly is very bad for you. Not that cane sugar is that much better, but let's use cane sugar instead, and we can rename it. It's going to come to me, I promise. Mexican Coke. Moron. Speaking of morons, let's check in on the master negotiator. It has been 108 days since Donald's so-called Liberation Day, which makes me blush every time I say it because it's so embarrassing. That's when he launched an unprovoked, unilateral global trade war against some of our closest trading partners and a bunch of penguins. You know, the ones on that little uninhabited by people island. We were told by White House maniac, trade advisor Peter Navarro that there would be 90 deals in 90 days. But so far, we've only got about 3 deals and a bunch of papers that appear to have been written at a third grade level. Also, by the way, I mean, to be fair, 90 deals in 90 days, I mean, did it necessarily have to be trade deals? Maybe they were talking about some other kinds of deals, like maybe a buy one, get one at McDonald's. Who knows? Over on CNBC's Squawk Box, they're starting to get a little restless with the lack of progress and the continual lying about the lack of progress. So take a look at the frustration of co-host Joe Curtin.
We get so excited about pending deals when we keep hearing last time it was, I think, by Wednesday we were going to have 2 or 3 big deals. And they don't come. Wouldn't it be better to just wait or something? Why does nothing, like India? We were sure India, we were going to hear about India. Can you update us on that? Or maybe you shouldn't update us, because then we start getting our hopes up and then nothing ever happened.
Right. The bottom line is that there have been ongoing negotiations with numerous countries and close to final deals.
Almost. We were not told that there would be 90 negotiations in 90 days. We were told that there would be 90 deals in 90 days. Maybe Hassett should listen to his boss because Donald doesn't appear to be very interested in any deals at all, which is really weird coming from the greatest deal maker in the history of deal makers. Watch this.
Am I right when I say I really don't want deals? I just want the paper to get sent? Right, it's true. I can't. I don't know if this is on television. Yeah, it's always on television.
What? I mean, first of all, what? And secondly, is that funny? Is it funny that the president of the United States just there said that he's not interested in making any deals to put an end to his disastrous trade war? Okay. Well, if that seems a little sketchy, let's check out this next thing because, in my view, this sort of blows everything else out of the water in terms of evidence, if you would like to call it that, or at least data that all is not well inside of Donald's little head. This week, he made a rather outrageous claim about the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, and his potential relationship with my great uncle, Donald's uncle John. I think he might have been a little confused, but let's see if we can clarify some things. But first, watch this.
You have to brag just for a second because when I first heard about AI, it's not my thing. Although my uncle was at MIT, one of the great professors, 51 years, whatever. He was the longest serving professor in the history of MIT, 3 degrees in nuclear, chemical, and math. That's a smart man. Kaczynski was one of his students. Do you know who Kaczynski was? There's very little difference between a madman and a genius. But Kaczynski, I said, what kind of a student was he, Uncle John, Dr. John Trump? He said, what kind of a student? And he said, seriously good. He said he'd go around correcting everybody, but it didn't work out too well for him. Didn't work out too well.
There is, however, a vast difference between a genius and a fucking idiot, but that's a subject for the other day. Actually, that's a subject for every day. But let's get back to the confusion. I'm going to start with the least important things first. My great uncle John, yes, was indeed an MIT professor for a very long time. He was not the longest serving MIT professor. Not a big deal. He was an electrical engineer, so he did not have 3 degrees. I mean, he was very, very smart man. He was an inventor and a well-respected scientist in electrical engineering, but he did not have advanced degrees in math, chemical, or nuclear. I have to be honest, I don't know what a degree in nuclear or chemical would look like anyway. But even if they existed, my great uncle John didn't have any of those 3 degrees. Now let's get to the more interesting part here. Because, it's okay to be confused about the details, even if it's about your uncle. Not that that's ever happened to me. But why would it be bragging to say that your uncle taught the Unabomber? Like, it's almost like being proud that your uncle was best friends with a fucking pedophile and sex trafficker of girls and young women. Getting back to the Unabomber and my great uncle John. The Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, did not go to MIT, so it's extremely unlikely that my great uncle would have had him as a student. That's one. 2, Ted Kaczynski didn't get caught for his crimes. He did not become notorious until at least a decade after my great uncle John died. So the conversation that Donald told us that he had with his uncle John about the Unabomber couldn't possibly have happened. This is the very alarming part here. The story Donald told about his uncle having had Ted Kaczynski as a student echoes a story Jeffrey Epstein told one of his friends, that he was a math student in Ted Kaczynski's class at UCLA, which is indeed where Kaczynski taught. So what does this tell us? This tells us that Donald has something on his mind, and it is showing up in unexpected ways because he is trying so desperately to suppress the absolute abject terror he is experiencing as he loses control of the whole Jeffrey Epstein client list narrative. But you know what? Let's move on from that because there's been a lot else going on this week. And quite frankly, there is nothing about what's happening with Epstein and the files and anything involving Donald or anybody else in that case that is funny. So this brings us to White House spokesperson Ava Braun. Sorry, Caroline Leavitt, who also, quite frankly, isn't funny, but it is very fun to mock her because she's grotesque. On Thursday, she was asked to clear up any confusion about the aforementioned issue with my great uncle John, and here was her charming response.
Andrew, go ahead.
So on Tuesday, the president told a very detailed story about his uncle, noted scientist John Trump, and Theodore Kaczynski, the late Unabomber. He said that Dr. Trump taught Ted Kaczynski. Ted Kaczynski was not identified as the Unabomber until 1996, 11 years after John Trump passed away. It would have been impossible for John Trump to have ever discussed the Unabomber with the president. So what was he talking about? And I have one follow-up.
Andrew, with so many issues going on in the world, I'm a little bit surprised you would ask such a question, although I'm not sometimes coming from you, I will say, but I'm willing to give you an answer. Nevertheless, the president's uncle did, in fact, teach at MIT. He was a very intelligent professor. The president's very proud of his family. In fact, the president has a letter from his uncle on the MIT letterhead that sits in the Oval Office dining room. Maybe we'll let you see it sometime.
Oh, wow. That would just make my life so much better if I could see that meaningless letter. Okay, so the contempt, the condescension, and yet, at the end of all of it, she doesn't even answer the fucking question. Why? Because she can't. So the question is, do we think that it is irresponsible or silly for a reporter to ask a question about the president of the United States' total fabrication, unnecessary fabrication of a story, in the event it might tell us something about his declining cognitive abilities? I don't think so. But then again, I'm not Caroline Leavitt, and I am not paid to lie to the American people every single minute of my life. Remember the autopen scandal? I mean, how could you forget it? It's like seriously the only thing that Donald can talk about. Well, actually, that isn't true. But it's one of his favorite ways to try to distract us from other things. And the right is doing everything in its power to do just that. They want to turn the page from the Jeffrey Epstein file debacle that Donald cannot disentangle himself from. On Fox Day TV, they literally are trying to set us in a completely different direction. Although, you know, sometimes even Fox does have its fingers on the pulse of what is necessary for the American people to know. And I don't actually think they're wrong here to think that the most compelling scandal in the history of the United States is not the big lie, is not the malicious mishandling of the coronavirus pandemic, is not the incitement of an insurrection against his own government. It is not indeed whatever is going on with Jeffrey Epstein, because, you know, nothing to see here, move right along. It is Joe Biden's autopen crisis. Did Joe Biden, while he was president of the United States, use an autopen like every other single president has since the 1940s? Heaven forfend. Because if he did, well, I guess that just makes him like every other fucking president of the United States since the 1940s. But the right would have you believe that the fact that Biden didn't sign every single document that comes through his office with his own hand and instead use an autopen, that meant he was really not in charge of anything and had absolutely no ability to know who he was, where he was, or why he was there. House Oversight Committee Chairman Jamie Comer is going to get to the bottom of this urgent scandal immediately, which is good because, well, is it? Because Joe Biden, last I checked, isn't president anymore. Anyway, let's take a look at this report from NBC.
NBC News conducted an analysis of the communications that the chair of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, has used to bring in former members of the Biden White House to ask them questions about Biden's use of the autopen and his cognitive decline in office. And what we discovered is that of the 16 letters that Comer sent to these staffers, that they were all signed with the use of a digital signature, meaning that he did not actually sign these documents himself.
Oops. Well, listen. Your tax dollars at work. Well done. Well done. In more incompetence news, Donald has, as you know, had an ongoing feud with Fed Chairman Jerome Powell since the beginning of his term. And actually, I don't think it's fair to call it a feud because that would suggest both people are involved. I think Jerome Powell just wants to do his job. It's the fact, though, that Powell, who actually understands what his job is and understands how to do it, that he's refusing to lower interest rates because Donald wants him to, and Donald's mad. So once again, Donald threatened to fire Powell this week, even though it would be illegal to do so. And when the markets began to plummet in the wake of that threat, he changed his mind. Or what's another way I could put it? Oh yeah, he de-tacoed. I'm sorry, the D is silent. Donald Trump always chickens out, and he chickened out again.
He's a terrible Fed chair. I was surprised he was appointed. I was surprised, frankly, that Biden put him in and extended him.
It must be Biden's fault. Let's take a look at the next clip of Biden appointing Jerome Powell.
Accordingly, it is my pleasure and my honor to announce my nomination of Jerome Powell to be the next chairman of the Federal Reserve. Congratulations, Jay.
That's really weird. Like the older Biden gets and the older Donald gets, the more they look alike. Huh. Listen, I would not want it being said that Donald is losing his mind or that he has memory problems. At least as far as I remember, I wouldn't want to imply those things, would I? But that kind of forgetfulness is common in elderly people, especially those who are under extraordinary amounts of stress. Donald is like sharper than a tack, isn't he? He's cognitively as sharp as he's ever been. Because remember, he took a test. He took a test several times called the Montreal Cognitive Assessment Test, the MoCA. And that test screens for dementia. Wait a second. Why was he taking it then? Oh, but never mind. That's irrelevant. Here Donald is explaining all of that this week.
And, AOC, look, I think she's very nice, but she's very low IQ. And we really don't need low IQ. Between her and Crockett, we're going to give them both an IQ test to see who comes out best. Now, I took my test. I took a real test at Walter Reed Medical Center, and I aced it. I got every one of all those questions right. Now it's time for them to take a test. Anyway, have a good time.
What do those two women have in common that would make him say they're low IQ? I have no idea. But you know what? I am going to talk about that test. He brought it up. Donald did not take an IQ test. I am a clinical psychologist. I was trained in giving test batteries to patients. That included achievement tests and IQ tests. These are very complex instruments. They take a couple of hours to give. They take several hours to score, and more time than that to analyze the data, and more time than that to write the results and the conclusions. Okay. as I mentioned, Donald took the mocha, which is a screening for dementia. It takes about 10 minutes, and it is designed to be passed with flying colors. It is designed for you, if you're taking it, to get every single question correct. Why? Because it's screening for dementia, not intelligence. Let's put it this way. If somebody asked you to identify a picture of a camel, would you be able to do that? And if you could, would that make you smart? Or would that just mean that you were oriented as to time and place and you know what a fucking camel looks like? Anyway, before we get to our final troll, please help us get the word out by liking this video and sharing it with like-minded friends and family, or even unlike-minded ones, because that would be fun. We are so close to 500,000 subscribers, so if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much. I want to close out this week with a quote from my friend Rosie O'Donnell, who quite frankly rocks, and who has been speaking the truth about Donald Trump for decades now. For that very reason, Donald has had it in for her for just as many decades. And here's a report to catch you up on what's been happening recently.
President Trump has ignited a new war with Rosie O'Donnell. He says he's thinking of revoking her U.S. citizenship. Rosie O'Donnell is not in the best interest of our great country. I am giving serious consideration to taking away her citizenship, he wrote on Truth Social. He dug in even deeper at Andrews Air Force Base Sunday.
I don't know about Rosie. I watch Rosie. Rosie's a mess. She's a mess.
Their feud dating back to 2006 when O'Donnell blasted Trump on The View for his handling of controversial allegations that surfaced about the newly crowned Miss USA. In response, O'Donnell took to her own social media saying, "You want to revoke my citizenship? Go ahead and try. King Joffrey with a tangerine spray tan. I'm not yours to silence. I never was."
Yeah, keep going down that road, Donald. If you are not horrified that a president of the United States is going after private American citizens and threatening to revoke their citizenships, then maybe you're not paying enough attention. But the truth of the matter is, there is one person in this scenario who does not deserve to be an American citizen. And sadly for all of us, it happens to be the guy that 74 million people put back into the White House. So let's keep up the pressure. And let's keep coming back here every week to do the one thing that Rosie O'Donnell knows better than most. The most effective weapon against a wannabe dictator like Donald Trump, that pathetic excuse for a human being, is to mock him. And man, oh man, there is so much to mock. Thanks for watching this week's Trump Trolls Trump. I'll see you back here next week. Thanks, everybody.